And we're live right now on YouTube. So, hello to everyone joining today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So, this is one more on the Lewis Michael Show series. Oh, I think the sound is coming there from your side. So, we need to shut down the speakers.
On my side.
Yeah. I can hear myself.
Oh, see, does that help? Is that helping?
Um, yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay. So, um, everything seems to be okay now. Uh, Today I have, as you probably already seen, a guest with me, as I usually do. We're going to be showing his book. This is still a showcase show, but we're also going to be going in depth into what our guest has done in the past, comic book related, because he's got quite a lot of stories there and an interesting history with indie comics and also mainstream comics. So, without any further ado, I'll just introduce the gentleman that you've already seen on the screen. It is Steve Benton. Hello, how are you anyway?
Very good, Lewis. Very
Okay.
good.
And where you're at the moment is Pacific Coast, right?
Yeah, I'm actually in a suburb of Las Vegas,
Oh,
Nevada.
that's awesome, Vegas. So is it always good weather there, I suppose, isn't it?
Not
Cool.
always. Last week we had snow, so
Oh my.
it's a bit chilly. February's rough for us.
All right, very good. Well, then it's exactly where you are. Just wanted to an approximate location.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, Steve here, my guest today is a long friend of mine, longtime friend of mine, and he is well, he's basically a graphic designer, he's a digital artist with a bachelor's degree in fine arts from the Savannah College of Art and Design. He has previously worked in the digital world with some credits that include Lindsay Lohan Show, isn't it? Funhouse, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Did the season finale
Oh,
with
very good.
Lindsay Lohan and Coldplay for I think it was 2005 for SNL for
And
the
SNL, yes, Saturday Night
yeah,
Live.
Robert Smigel.
Well, obviously, everybody knows that I have a crush on Lindsay Lohan, so but I won't go into that now. It's too early in the evening. Now, Steve always wanted to be a sequential artist, so he started pursuing a career in indie comics, on and off. And I will start sharing straight away because Steve has a lot of things here to show us. And I will just first point out, folks, to your website, which is it's actually called. Can you tell us the name of your website?
Yeah, it's anarchysam.com.
Anarchy Sam. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anarchy Sam. You have a obviously it's a website dedicated to your work, but you are kind enough to include a series of interviews with other indie creators, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, we have to kind of lift each other up, right? I mean, it's pretty tight knit industry. I think everybody involved knows that. So it's always good to obviously you need content, right? You need to share content to bring people to your place, your channel, your website. So that's but it's in the nature of working with everybody. Everybody should work together.
Absolutely, yeah. And I hope you are seeing this. I hope everyone is watching this right now. Um, and if we go into your page dedicated, well, page dedicated to yourself, right here, we can see some of your previous works in comics. So, as I usually ask everyone coming into this show, where did your passion for comics started, and what was your first uh, foray into comics? Basically, you have it that here explained on your website, but it's better to hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, yeah. So like most people, I started out drawing when I was young, and found that I really enjoyed my time when I was creating art, right? When we all get into that zone and time just disappears and stuff. So from about the time I was 5 years old, and I think a lot of it has to do with like praise, family member praise, right? I remember my mom, you know, hanging things on the wall, or my brother making fun of things I drew. And from there, you know, you realize, man, I would really love to make a living doing something I enjoy, right? Because honestly, who goes through life thinking, oh, you know what? When I grow up, I want to work in the IT department of Sands Casino, right? I mean, not many people think like that. So
I know a couple of guys.
right, yeah. Nowadays, though, it is people specialize, and you know, like Derek Jeter was like, I'm going to grow up to become the shortstop for the New York Yankees when he was living in Michigan, I think. And sure enough, he did it. So it does help to be more focused these days. But to answer your question, I always wanted to be an artist, even in school, right? I was that kid that was always drawing instead of taking notes, and we all know how that goes. I'm sure a lot of your listeners and viewers have been in that same boat. So I decided to I was working at a cold storage warehouse. I didn't know what to do with myself. I just graduated high school, and I tried to apply to the Parsons. It was actually Otis Parsons School of Design in New York City. I grew up in the Hudson Valley, just north of New York City. So I applied, but I applied in January because we didn't have a lot of money, my family growing up, and I didn't get accepted, right? So it was like a crushing blow. And later I learned that, you know, it was because I tried to, first of all, it's a prestigious school, and I went in there with long hair and a jean jacket, and I didn't present myself well. And that's how I started, though. I always knew I wanted to be an artist, and I think a lot of it had to do with family praise.
So you mentioned here that what was your first comic work? You mentioned here you were at SCAD. What is SCAD? Sorry.
Well, SCAD is the Savannah College of Art and Design, right?
All
So
right.
I originally was going to go for a School of Visual Arts in New York. Excuse me, but growing up in New York, I kind of wanted to get away, right? You got to get away, go with the family, or get away from the family. So I went down to Savannah because they gave me a lot of credits. I had gone to a community college in upstate New York, right? Orange County Community College, and didn't know what to do with myself because I knew I had some talent, but it's like there's a difference between being good at your hobby and being able to make a living doing, you know, using those skills. And so I went down to Savannah, which was a pretty big school. They promoted themselves really well. And I remember a poster in my high school painting class that said, you know, apply to Savannah. So I got accepted to RIT. I got accepted to Otis out in Los Angeles. But I decided to go to Savannah, Georgia, because it was still within a driving distance, and they were pretty prestigious at the time. Oh, and now I remember exactly why I chose to go to SCAD, right? That's what they call it out here, SCAD.
Yeah.
So I went to SCAD because when I did a portfolio review at Pratt, which is in Brooklyn, the portfolio review person was like, "Oh man, well you're doing like junior level art here," and the issue was I was going to go in as a freshman with no credits transferring from my community college, so I still would have had to pay for 4 years of school. Although he felt I was a year away from graduating, right, talent wise. So when I went to visit Savannah, they had what were Silicon Graphics computers at the time. So they had a bunch of SGIs, while SVA were working on Apple. Man, it was the model after mine. I had an old Apple IIX, right, which is a pretty rare computer, Apple II Extended, and their model was like the next model after mine. But this was 2004 when I was looking. So SCAD just had better equipment, and I realized you really need the opportunity to work on better equipment, because if you're a scientist, nobody has a centrifuge, right, like CERN, in their backyard. So you might want to pick a place that has the best equipment for you to utilize. Because I knew I'd never be able to afford a $30,000 computer like SCAD was offering their students. And that's the gist of my story. SCAD had the best equipment at the time that Hollywood was using, so I chose them.
Very
So I
good.
chose to go to SCAD.
So, but then you went from the course you were trying to do, which was just a major in fine art, right? And you obviously, and then that's how you decided to go into computer graphics, right? And so you majored in that eventually, right? That's your bachelor's degree.
Yeah. Honestly, I have a interesting story about why I switched my majors. I was originally going to be a sequential illustrator,
Yeah.
and I went to a portfolio review for Dark Horse.
Right.
There was a kid that was excellent, but it left me feeling a little empty, right? Because I was starting to get into animation a little bit more. The movies that were coming out were pretty great in the early '90s. And the biggest kicker, though, was I sat next to a Marvel colorist, and I was 24 at the time when I first went to college, and he was, I think, 21 or 22, and he worked for Marvel out in New York City, right? And I had just left New York City, but he worked for Marvel to come to learn computer animation because he wasn't making enough money doing the colors for Marvel's books. And that always struck me, and that's why I switched majors.
Yeah, that usually is the case.
yeah, it was a shame.
Okay, well, I've already started sharing some of your American Bison, which is your main comic book work. Anything else you've done previously throughout years before American Bison, comics related?
Yeah, and I see you, and you keep trying to get me into it, Lewis, and I apologize for deviating from the path. Komodo, which you're showing.
Oh, I'm just showing because I did discover.
Yeah,
tell us more about it then.
I wish I could spend more time to do quality work like this. My biggest personal problem, and we all have our own excuses. My excuse is, I work 40 hours a week, like most of us do. And then in my spare time is my only time to really work on comics or anything else, music or whatever I feel like doing. And with Komodo, I spent some time on the cover. I really did. Like the interiors, I learned a lot, right? Because I met this guy off of Craigslist because I was looking for a writer, and I did it for free, which I didn't realize that as an artist, you're not supposed to do anything for free, right? Nothing for exposure anymore, which I totally disagree with. But that's a whole nother interview. So yeah, Komodo was my first foray into doing like a legit full length, 24-page comic, because I think we all have it in us, right, where we can do the pinup, or we can do 1 page, or we can do the 4-page submission. Man, it's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of effort to do those 24 pages. So I really wanted to see if I had it,
So this is a one-off issue?
Yeah, he eventually, it's very text heavy, and I let him. And once again, this is probably for another interview if you ever bring me back. Was very text heavy, and he called all the shots, which I kind of disagree with, right? Because as visual artists, that's really our lane, right? And I get it. Unless you're a known writer.
Yeah,
Man,
I understand what you're saying.
Sometimes let the artist just do their thing.
Yeah, leave a little leeway. So you hired this guy off Craigslist, yeah? Well, that's kind of talent you get on Craigslist.
Yeah, right. I really didn't hire him. It was more of him and I partnering together to see what we could create with his script, which was very text heavy, and he knew it, and we tried to edit it. But it was a pretty funny script. Basically, in a nutshell, it was a young kid who just one day, kind of like Kafka's Metamorphosis, one day wakes up as this Komodo dragon and doesn't know what to do with himself, and his trials and tribulations of suddenly becoming a hero with these weird powers.
Mhm.
It's
Okay, so this is this the
1970.
when was this done? Sorry, what year?
Oh, this is man, 2000. I want to say 2010 or 11. I think 2010 because I was living at a different place.
Oh, okay, that's not that long ago. I thought this was back in the late '90s. Okay,
Yeah,
very good.
yeah. That's just my old antiquated drawing style.
That's fine. So we got Komodo here. That was your first foray, self-published, right? And is this
Yeah, it's
available for purchase anywhere?
it's up on Comixology. I think it has like one review,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's not terrible. The one thing I would like to do, the one thing I feel is terrible, and honestly, if I were a young guy, never show your weaknesses, right? So if you're
Yeah,
young, don't go in telling people what you think is terrible. Never do that. But for
yeah,
me, I'm old. I have my other career. The colors. I've learned don't use straight gradients in your colors, man.
mhm.
Ever. Don't ever do it. It looks cheap. You know, that airbrush look, it makes everything soft and bubble looking. It's a terrible look, and you'll get one strike against you on any submission that you apply to with
Yeah.
that work.
Oh, that's a good side note to keep aware for any digital colorist out there. Anyway, I still like the look of this. Would definitely like to see the inside. But now let's forget this for a little bit and go here to your other work, the one that you've been dedicating yourself through these last, well, I'll say at least 5 to 6 years, isn't it? So you got American Bison here. American Bison is an idea that came to you when and why and how.
All right. I will answer you straight away, Lewis, I promise. Came to me in 2009, and it was really just a test to see if I could make an amalgamation of a cool animal,
Mhm.
a cool time frame, and a cool uniform. So I came up with a buffalo, right? Buffaloes are pretty distinctive looking. So I came up with a buffalo, and I was like, well, what time frame? And I
Mhm.
think Abe Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, had just come out. So I
Right,
was
yeah.
like, oh man, so, Civil War era. Well, I'll make him a Union soldier, right? He's a Buffalo soldier, so I'll make him in the Union Army, and he'll, so it was trained trained in the East, uh, fights in the West for the North, something to that effect.
Right. Okay, got
Yeah, I had it rolled off the tongue more in when I did write it down.
it.
So
So,
that's where the idea came from.
just to give people the gist of this. So you have how many issues done altogether? Or other words, by other words, different question. What are we looking at now? This American Bison issue that we got here. Is this a pre-issue? Is this an issue one? What is
Yes,
it?
that was actually another pre-issue because I wanted to see once again if I could. Now the test was with Komodo. Hey, can I draw 24 pages of
Mhm.
somebody's story? And American Bison was then it was just going to be a one-off, and it was can I draw and write 24 pages
Mhm.
and get a complete story? I think it's actually only 22.
It's okay. It's
Uh,
still a normal size comic book.
yeah, the interesting thing with this, just because we try to help each other out. Ken Lamoog did the alternate or the variant cover for this. That's up at the
Right.
top, and Ken worked on Monstrous with Greg Wright, I think his name is the author's name, for Source Point Press.
Right. I think I've seen that.
Yeah.
By the way, this gets quite violent here, so warning any juvenile viewers. It's a pretty nasty scene here. The arms are ripped off, just like the legs are as well, and the heads are separated, and the whole thing has been eaten by coyotes and wolves. And it's pretty dramatic opening here with this anthropomorphic buffalo just kicking ass savagely without saying anything. Children and men alike. So, but carry on.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to use this as a learning moment. When you have dark subject matter, you really shouldn't use bright, cheerful colors. Once again, another learning
Well,
moment. Or
I actually like that contrast, actually, because obviously it's against the rule and it is unusual. But yeah, it's almost like you kind of brought into this kind of story with the colors that you've created here. That is almost like it's like a low key Walt Disney esque affair, and then suddenly you have this utter violence, and that kind of doesn't, like you say, doesn't really match.
right, yeah, and
But I like it. I dig that.
and
I dig the clash.
yeah, I was trying something new, right? Because I'm a nobody. Let's face it. I'm a fledgling artist in this industry. So I was trying things that probably had I read a bunch of books on it, I would have known not to do that. My other once again, I'm just saying this stuff for anybody young enough to give a crap
Yeah,
that's
sure.
listening to this is details really help. You can that happens a lot when we're inking things where we really lose all the details and the efforts of the pencil drawing.
Yeah.
But man, try to go for the details. Unfortunately, my computer at the time wasn't really allowing for me to do that. So I was struggling just getting my tablet to get what it could on screen. You can see where, like, at times, not on these pages, but at times it'll get the sharp angles, right? Because I'm running out of memory as I'm doing the page. So just try to
But,
keep
but
things
by
detailed,
the way,
you know.
you work digitally, right? Never traditionally. This is all digital work. All the issues of American Bison.
Yes, all the almost 95% of it. What I learned is digital is definitely faster, and
Mhm.
I'm a guy who I try to work fast because I really only have, and this is sad, but it's the truth. I
Okay.
have about 4 hours per week to myself, right? Because I have to take care of my daughter, and I'm married, right?
Yeah.
So
Still
gotta
great time.
gotta do family time. I have 4 hours of my own time to get in
Mhm.
there and do something. And you guys know how it is. It always takes some time to warm up. And as a
Yeah.
pro, which I aspire to be, you can't make excuses like, oh, I only had 4 hours to work on this. Boo hoo
Mhm.
hoo. Yeah, I've seen guys inking for image. And this is no lie, inking for image on YouTube with no heat in their house. They're wearing winter gloves on their hand and they're inking. I wrote the guy, I forget who it was at the time. This is 5 or 6 years ago. I'm like, dude, what are you doing inking, you know, this comic in the cold? He's like, dude, it's all I can, this is where I live. I can't afford to turn the heat on,
Oh, that's one of
so
the reasons why you're here today, because obviously we want to have the time to discuss the whole state of the industry as it
right,
is,
yeah,
and
totally.
we I mean that would be a wonderful stream of maybe 5 to 6 hours, and we would just end up repeating what a lot of the pros and fans and semi-pros and indie advocates are saying. All their streams all around YouTube, people that obviously are dedicated themselves to the comic book industry,
Right.
again, both as fans and as pros and as newcomers and hopefuls as well, which is the regular state of not just at the big two, Marvel and DC, but it kind of it fizzles itself out down the pyramid, down the hierarchy. I mean, Image being one of the main culprits, which is an unusual thing. It's the bread and butter of all these publishing houses, and obviously now that you mentioned Image, in that case of that guy at Image, and then later on in this interview we're going to get there again, obviously because of one of the main
Right.
points we're going to be making. But it is their bread and butter. It is a known affair. It is a known case that again we won't have time for that, for only that, but it's worth repeating once again that these guys, they always find a way to get their quota. The house, like in a casino, it always wins. Yeah, so they will find a way to get your quota, but then does that trickle down the creative team? Like you mentioned, is a worker working in the cold because he cannot afford heating. Now that is not unusual. That's the whole point of what I was trying to get to.
Right.
That is a trend. That is what is normal. You have these creative teams which are doing books for major publishers that have worldwide sales, and they're organized to the point that obviously they're in every shop. They have first dibs at the shelves at retail, and that they have benefits when they go on digital sales as well. They don't get charged what you charge when you put your book up on Comixology. I guarantee you guys that they have special deals, and that's what they pay their creative teams. It's nothing. They either pay close to nothing or nothing. I mean, there's several cases which have been quoted online several times of teams sharing the profit of a trade paperback, paperback, so not individual floppy issues, but a trade paperback, which probably is compiling 3 to 6 issues or more, and they're sharing a profit of like $5,000. That's $5,000 to share between writers, which usually is more than one, artists. Now let's say if you have an inker, like the guy you just quoted the example, the poor guy working in the cool, then you have a penciler. If you have an inker, then you have a penciler. So at least you have two artists there. Most likely it's going to be colored. Most likely, I mean, the black and white books, especially by the major publishers, they're really a very small minority. Maybe not even 5% or 10%. Well, there's a few grayscale looking books out there, but black and white books, there's very little of them. So there's going to be a colorist there. And so that's where you already have 4 people there in the bag. Writer, thinking that it's only one when it's usually more than one. 2 artists, a colorist, which is also an artist. And then you have the letterer. Rarely in a professional looking book, you have a letterer that is a colorist, which is an inker. You don't have that. You usually have a separate letterer, which usually is someone chosen by the editor if it is a book by Image, because they're going to be hands-on on the project. You go there with your creator-owned property, you pay them a fee to publish the book, and then whatever royalties you have at the back end of the sales, you get that. You get the dividends, right? But these guys is like a team of at least 5 people, and they're going to be sharing the profit of that. Why? Because obviously, they don't promote the book that much once they actually take it in and take the obligation to publish it. And what happens is the book doesn't sell what you should sell, or either because the project has not been well guided or well chosen in the first place, and so you end up with a book that has absolutely no profit. So the story of the poor sap inker working in the dilapidated flat, traditionally with no heat in the dead of winter, is not unusual. I mean, this is what I'm saying. I mean, what's the point on having a credit in the book that it was published by Image when you don't have the money to feed yourself? What's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no difference. No difference between being a creator, which is self-publishing, and a guy that is working in a project that gets published by one of the big names. There's absolutely no difference. But anyway, what is the story of American Bison? What are the characters, and where you actually what have you actually done with this story? What are we looking at?
All right, so do you the initial idea? Do you want the initial idea of what it was supposed to be and what it turned out to be?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So the initial idea, which Aftershocks Comics Animosity did a pretty good job piggybacking on my concept, right? The initial idea was this buffalo wakes up in 1850, right? And I had to start it out early because it was going to be before the Civil War. And this actually takes place a few years before the Civil War because I wanted to try to get my skill set to ramp up when I actually had some really interesting stories, to tell with the bison. So like a fool, I started at the beginning of the story, and let this be a lesson also to new creators. Start at the climax of your story, right? So the American bison wakes up, and without getting too far off track, the American bison becomes a sentient being. And initially, it was just going to be this animal that started to gain intelligence. So in the first issue, he was going to be violent because after researching buffaloes, I realized, and it's mentioned in the first issue, that we almost brought them, we almost made them extinct, right? The Americans did that. When we came in here, we hunted them to near extinction. So it was going to be a revenge story, which I believe Year of the Goat did, right? Another indie comic. I'm not sure. I don't pick up my competitors all the time. I just bitch and complain about them. So the American bison then is starting to seek revenge on the Union soldiers that are opening up the West, and it later becomes deviated by a guy I worked with, this guy Lou Frontier, and it basically became Hellboy in the West, just not nearly as well written or as well drawn.
Right now to your co-writer, Lou Frontier. So then you have that pre-issue, and this now that we're looking at here now is the proper issue 1. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And by the way, so again, this is available on your website for purchase, all of them. And just to tell people that the series is up to issue 3. And how many more issues you have planned of this story?
I have one issue. I'm getting the echo now, so I got to take off my headphones. I have one issue written, one final issue written, right? Because for me, what happens, it would take a year to do these with my 4 hours a week to draw and create, and to write them, draw them, ink them, color them. But that's why I worked online, right, to avoid pencils and inking. And but a friend of mine, Braden Cox, who had a insane comic published title named Reclaiming Godhood, he actually has issues 5, 6, 7, and 8 written. I won't give that away too much, but Braden Cox was going to then take up the helm of this, because I didn't make much money on it. I didn't promote it well, which is why Lou Frontier was heavily involved in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I have one more issue that I would like to conclude the story with.
Right.
But there are 4 more issues just sitting, waiting in the background.
Right, got you. So it's 4 more issues planned by someone else. And would you be willing to let go of the IP, or still own the IP and have someone else work on it, both the writing and the art?
It's funny, Lewis, because man, I would sell the IP in a heartbeat.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So you're offering sales, so for anyone interested, there we go.
Yeah.
So basically, this is the same issue we just saw there before, but it's just been reworked. Now, reworked because you brought in the other writer and you changed some of the actual writing, some of the texts, because obviously the art is still the same, so the idea is still the same, just the colors are slightly different. So what did Lou Frontier, this chap that you brought in to help you write this, what did he bring onto the scene? What did he change on the book then?
All right. So Lou, first and foremost, brought enthusiasm. I was sucked in by his enthusiasm, right? Because as a sole creator, and everybody knows, there are points where you start doubting yourself and you're like, man, I want this to be so much better than it is. And this guy came in with enthusiasm. So what I had him do is I had him take a look at my creator, issue 1, which was very sparsely written, right? Because the bison, by design, wasn't supposed to speak,
right?
And or at least not very much. And Lou came in and was like, "Hey, we can make this guy, a legit superhero type character.
That's
we'll
right.
Make him, a Hellboy-ish character."
Mm-hmm.
And then, that was his approach, which I was receptive to at first. He had some really good ideas. One of the nice things I noticed that he did, which take this into account also, you guys just starting out, is details. Once again, he put details into the script. Like he came up with a Smoke Mount Ridge, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what Smoke Mount Ridge is. He never had an idea what smoke, but it's a mountain range in our world, and he put a name to it. And then we could then build off of that, right? So in issue 2, they go up to Smoke Mount Ridge because there's a bunch of miners,
Yeah.
gold miners that live up there. So what
Right.
Lou did, he brought in some humanity to what was otherwise a pretty straightforward, bland script. And after you read your own script like at least 4,000 times while you're drawing it and inking it
Yeah.
and lettering it, you start questioning every word, right? So I was abridging every sentence, and you lose the whole point of why you're writing the story, which is to connect with other humans.
Yeah. By the time you get to the end, you just rewritten the whole thing, and you just notice by the end, wait a second, this is not what I wanted to tell after all,
Exactly. So
tell me one thing, this Lou Frontier guy, what had he done before, and where did you find him?
Well, Lou was working with Wicker, or on the book Wicker, right, which was about a witch in the 19th century. So,
and that's been published by who?
That was Insane Comics also.
All right, okay. So he's also creator-owned and Insane Comics. Insane Comics, by the way, is a label. I've seen some of their books. They got some nice peaks there. They got their website, but then they have a good, strong presence at indie conventions, isn't it? They're always have a nice setup with many titles to choose from. Meaning they kind of have an extended portfolio of anything you want is there. They have horror, sci-fi. They have kind of action, thriller-oriented comics, isn't it?
James Munch, the publisher, he was a good guy. Everybody has their own reason for getting into, the businesses they get into, and James, he was trying, but my brother had a fledgling or a small record label in New York. So I saw what James was trying to do. And the whole point is, and this is no offense to James, it's not meant to be, offending, is because it's the same thing my brother was trying to do, like I said, is you get a portfolio of work, right, that you've licensed from other people, and you publish it, right? You either publish in the album or you're publishing a comic book, and you're hoping that one of those hits it big. So you're hoping for big names, right? Like Kelly Bender, he was one of the writers for a few issues, or a few titles for Insane Comics, and he was, a fairly well-known name. Luke Cooper for Hollow Girl, he was and has made a name for himself.
Yeah,
but these guys, I think James was banking on them more than he possibly should have. The Insane Comics is no longer around, for those wondering. And it's a shame because James was doing good things, but he overextended himself, in my personal opinion. And comics, as we all know, it's really hard to be successful at.
Right. You're right. I had forgotten about that. They are gone, yes. Source Point Press, though, they're still around. They also seem to have a nice portfolio, but there you go. Insane Comics. It's no longer a thing. You had some. You had a little bit of contention as well with the way your promotion of your book was handled. But let's leave that right for the end, as going back to Lou Frontier and what he was adding to the story. You can pick up on that if you want and carry on.
Oh yeah, because the problem with Lou was, what he was adding to the story, he was also taking away from my story and bringing it onto his own stories. But I don't know if you want me to go down that road just yet.
No, yeah. Well, let's wait a little bit longer for that, because obviously I don't want to share the whole issue all the way to the bottom, because obviously I want people to have an opportunity to go on your website, purchase this, get the whole series in their hands, and then read it, because obviously it is available in print, but it's also available as a digital download. So I don't want to show this compromising your sales, but I do want to share the other issues. So now that we understand what Lou has done here on issue one, so he basically worked with you in rewriting the script, and you were mostly happy with the new lore and details that he added, but at the
Right.
same time, he kind of changed your idea a little bit into making the Bison from a kind of a cryptic, mysterious character into kind of a super powered animal, basically. So like,
Right, because so my idea in a nutshell was that the Bison was going to be like the Hulk, right? So the army is after the Bison, and then they're going to force him into indentured servitude to fight for the Union Army.
oh right, okay,
That's where all of this is going. I should have answered that early on, but you see, I
that's
already
fine.
go off on tangents. So that was the initial concept, that the Bison then would then be enlisted into the U.S. Army and become a weapon for them.
Hmm.
And that's I had a whole bunch of things where Harriet Tubman was going to be involved. And it's funny because we'll touch on this probably later. Almost every idea I've come up with and shared with somebody gets made better by somebody else that somehow they knew. So it's like it never fails. And that's why I don't have much of a social media status, or
Hmm.
yeah, I'm kind of hidden because I'm so
Yeah,
paranoid.
I understand. Well, let's see one thing. We got issue two here, and Lou had a little finger in this as well. Did he help you with the script on issue two, or this is only you from here onwards?
No, this was all me from here out. I think Lou's story, we were going to go with like these chud type creatures, that the miners were going to be cannibals, and
Wow.
yeah, it was going to get strange, which could have worked. Like I
Right.
could have made work, because there's a whole nother aspect that I haven't even got to in these issues, and that's another thing that's killing me. It's like I wish I would have. It's hard as you move along because you start getting better ideas,
Yeah.
but you've already messed up the continuity of your story. So I see why, like, Breaking Bad TV wise was awesome because they already
Hmm.
knew the entire story before they wrote all the episodes, for the most part. I've heard, and
Well,
I wish I had that luxury.
well, exactly. I mean, but it can work. I mean, you can still even screwing up the continuity on the first few issues. You can
Yeah,
always
it's
pick up
comics, right?
you can always pick it up and then kind of excuse yourself with some changes, some flashbacks or whatever. But what you do need, it's a long series for that. That's a problem. And this is obviously giving you a lot of work because you have limited time and you're
Right.
doing everything by yourself. So let's say if you had, I don't know, 20 to 40 issues planned, you can afford to make changes at a whim because you have space, you have room to readjust the whole story and the plot and the characters. Unless obviously the changes are so dramatic in the first couple of issues or 3 to 4 issues, then it does not give you much room to play with. But as long as there's spaced out, I think you could still fix whatever you're unhappy with in the narrative. But you do
Yeah,
need a long series for that.
it's coming along. Another suggestion I would make to other people is, don't be like me, where everything is mediocre for the most part. You know what? No, seriously. Like, if you have a killer story,
Yeah,
man, it can't be stick figures, but it can be one step ahead. As long as you keep it going, as long as you have something to bring to the table. But it's got to be high quality. You can't just go in with low quality artwork and a piss poor story. It's just not going to work. You can
yeah,
get away with one or the other, right? But one of
that's true.
one of the elements has to be paramount. It has to be exceptional.
Okay,
That's
very true.
my personal feeling.
So we're looking at issue two, which was you mainly. Very little input from
Yeah,
Blue
yeah.
Frontier.
To
But now
answer,
I like to share this. I like to share this now. Just very, sorry, it's just to interrupt you. Continue.
oh, that's
But
fine.
just to share this, this is American Bison short stories. So this is another separate issue that you've done, not part of the continuity of the main story. And here, Blue Frontier had quite a hand in this, right?
Yes, yes. So Lou's involvement in issue 2 was,
Mhm.
I used the term Smoke Mount Ridge. So I didn't want to discredit him for that because he came up with that, right? So I didn't want any problems because by that point we had severed our partnership.
Right.
So before 2 had come out, this one had actually come out where Lou had enlisted all these, and you'll see like Mike Spicer. Mike Spicer's done work for Image Comics.
Yeah.
You know, so Lou was doing, and Christopher Harris he's up and coming, man. Christopher Harris is doing fantastic artwork now with his ancient cosmonauts.
Right.
There's a bunch of prints out of Kansas,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
James Linares is excellent. He's a good dude. And Aishe Han, man, up in Canada, does a great job. So Aishe Han did the cover for this, but
Right.
this was all Lou's involvement. Lou knew all these people except for Ken, and
Mhm.
Ken's story's solid in here, and Han's artwork for Buffalo Wings, which was written by Lou, is solid. Like, you know, this honestly is a pretty solid issue in my opinion.
Mhm.
The problem is just, you know, it's hard. It's hard promoting your stuff. We all know that. So you know,
Yeah.
that's why, Lewis. That's why we appreciate channels like this, where hey, maybe somebody that didn't even know about this book can say, ah, you know what? I finally get to see a little sampling of what Steve Benton did with American Bison. You know, maybe I will pick this up for $1.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, to be honest, this is a cool idea. I mean, I can't fault Lou kind of commercial input in this. I mean, it's nice to kind of have an offshot issue, kind of squeeze in between issue 1 and 2, just like you mentioned. That was the release schedule, and to have kind of these backstories on the main character, kind of fill in, uh, kind of even creating some parallel narratives just to fill in the lore. And for one thing you got to say, if this guy arranged everybody here in the credits page, that's probably what he's good at, which is what a lot of guys are good at. They're good at networking. They're good at just becoming friends with folks, and networking with them and talking them into helping out on an issue. I mean, I presume all these guys, kind of helped out on the issue just for the sake of helping, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Which I think for Aishe Han, I sent him a bunch of copies because I didn't know what the arrangements were between
Yeah.
Lou and these guys. And later I eventually asked them because and unfortunately for Lou, he was starting to turn out to be a sketchy kind of dude. And I hate to say that because he really did start out on the right foot where, you know, he was very helpful.
Well,
And then,
before we go there, let me just interrupt you to say that these sort of associations sometimes they're very, I'm not going to say profitable, but they're very good arrangements because when we're talking about books like this, which is like an omnibus basically, so like a
right.
book sharing of different guys coming in, and each one of the teams supplies a short story of 4 pages or 6 pages. Usually when guys do that, that's a great way to get actually pros to work on your book. It's a smart way to get a bunch of up and coming good talent because they're probably not going to ask you for any cash in advance, because it's just, we're talking about 2 pages, bro. We're talking about 4 pages, man. So
Yeah.
just come to my book, come to my anthology book, and and then whatever profits I make off the sales, I'll send you a little check in the end of it. So, and I can't fault this business strategy. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
There isn't too much of it though. But if everybody's happy, the guys are working it, they're not complaining, and then the customer is quite happy with the product. Why not? Why not? So, do I advocate for anthologies? Yeah, yeah. I mean, I used to curate similar projects back in the day where I used to have a series of guys participating in the books, but it was not in this format. They were more like sketches and strips and the 1-page cartoons. So I
Right.
had a bunch of friends supplying stuff, which they would just find in their in their portfolios, forgotten stuff, and that's how I made anthologies. I never went around actually asking guys that I knew, can you come up with 4 fresh pages, just for this book. But I don't have it in me. Like I said, Blue Frontier seems to be one of those guys. There's many guys like that have it in him, that he can network well, and he's a sweet talker, he
Yeah,
gets people
exactly,
to
exactly.
work for free, or whatever arrangements, like you were saying. You sent a bunch of copies to one of the guys because you didn't know what he was behind that. But it's good. Anthologies are great, because they promote talent, and they expose the characters. They give exposure to the characters. They get the book out there. It's probably the book you get more sales on it, isn't it? I mean, to be honest, if you get to the nitty gritty of it, this is probably the one you have more sales.
Yeah, yeah, this is definitely one of the better sellers because
Mhm.
it involves all those names, which I think James Munch was using as his publishing tactic, right? If you get all these creators, you get all their friends to buy the book.
Exactly.
So the more creators you have on, in your lineup, the more
You
sales.
might even have a big name there, and you
Right.
kind of wonder, oh well, okay, if Frank Miller is in this book.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
what did Frank Miller do? Why actually Frank Miller only does one panel on page 35. But who cares? He's in the book. It's like when cheap no budget C movies have Frank Stallone, Sylvester Stallone's brother, as the starring leading man, and he probably only shows up for 5 minutes. But who cares? It's Frank Stallone.
That's
So tell
cool.
me then, when did Blue Frontier then? Well, we know when he started winning, going off the rails, but what did he actually do? Because you're saying that he started obviously fishing out some of the ideas that he was working on this book and passing it along to other creative teams. Is that what happened?
Yeah, yeah. As far as I can tell, it's all speculation on my side. So I don't mean to badmouth anybody. Maybe it was just a big misunderstanding. But from my side, what I was starting to see was that Lou had his own title, right? Wicker, which I'm competing against with my
Mm-hmm.
title.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly he's got a Native American character in his book. Okay, I don't have the copyright on Native Americans by any means. But hey, Lou, don't you find this is a conflict of interest? So, it started out like that. And
Yeah.
then it became, hey, Lou, I'm thinking of doing this with our story. And he's like, oh, no, that's a terrible idea. And then he does it
Mhm.
in his story. Then he does it in his title.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I mean, obviously, the guy he can't be just stating uh, different ideas at the same time. They somehow can correlate, but to actually have an idea you want to use on a particular issue and kind of convince you that's not the right way, and then actually grab that idea, use it in another one that he's working at the same time. Well, I would say that's definitely a conflict of interests,
Yeah, yeah,
because
okay,
that's
yeah.
where the conflict
Because
is.
and that's where it started to go where suddenly he was first of all though if you are working with somebody and you're partnering with somebody make it and you're the newcomer make it 50-50 or below, right?
Mhm.
Because you're the minority partner in that relationship. Lou was trying to take it above and beyond. He was trying to make it like him 85 and me 15. And it was like, dude, this was all my concept. I liked your ideas, and that's why I brought you on board because certainly I could use the help. We all can. But
Yeah.
you can't take control and then start, railroading me into doing things your way when I just don't feel, so it's creative differences at the end of the day.
Yes, fair enough. Like it happens a lot of times. But you mentioned there was a couple of other books that came out after you guys had already thrown American Bison out there, and they came out. They're on a different scale of work, but they had some level of success, and you kind of presume it had something to do with your partnership. I mean, what are the other titles you were mentioning one of them is called Animosity. Is that right? Am I sharing this correctly now?
Yeah, right. So Aftershock, and what bothers me is, once again, I don't have the copyrights on talking animals, right? We all know you can't copyright an idea. But what had happened is I had promoted American Bison in a indie comics forum on Facebook.
Right.
And I saw that Aftershocks Comics were promoting like right after my promotions, which happens, right? It's just coincidence. But then like 4 months later, I see that the woman who had been writing, and once again, I'm just taking up this to coincidence because truth be told, in my opinion, what I feel she did is take my concept of an animal waking up and coming to life and seeking revenge.
Mm-hmm.
She did it across the board. Now, I've never read an issue of Animosity just because I'm a vengeful, spiteful little man. But I even mentioned to them in one of the forums when I was annoyed by it. I was like, "Hey, you forgot about the American Bison. When's he come in?" And that was when they first launched issue 1, and this is, I guess, issue. I think it's 3 that you're showing.
Right. Yeah.
And so that they already had it in mind that they were going to bring in an American Bison stuff. I've never spoken to them, and I'm sure they're decent people. Truth be told, they took my concept, or what I feel is my concept, right, of an animal waking up and seeking revenge. They applied it to all animals. So the wild animals are, in fact, wild animals. And, the domesticated animals are on the human side. As far as I know, I believe that's what.
Right.
Which is freaking brilliant. That's a great idea. It's a great idea. I wish I had thought about it. I wish I had taken it to that level. And I wish my artwork was even on par with what's being depicted here that we can see. So my point again, man, if you have a good concept, don't start broadcasting it. Hey, look at me. I have this idea, man, because the higher ups in the food chain, they're going to eat you, and they're going to take your idea and they're going to run with it, and it's going to be really successful, and they're probably going to win awards with it. And they're never going to say, hey, they're never going to throw you a bone and say, hey, yeah, we thought of this because of American Bison. They'll never admit to that, man.
Yeah.
It's like a bunch of other people will never admit to things.
Well, the animals are looking pretty nasty here. I mean, and the domesticated ones could be on the human side, but I don't think that elks and deers have ever been domesticated.
No,
wild animals.
So she's definitely enlisted some wild animals there.
Okay, well, this is Aftershock's Animosity. This book doesn't have any input by Steve here.
It's supposed to be excellent, and hey, man, pick it up because it looks great.
Well, yeah, it does. It does look great. And none of the people in this team have ever worked on any of your books, have they?
Oh no, they just happen to see my post.
They just happen to be a similar thing. Okay. All right. Well, back to your work. So we have
this is actually Ken Lemoog's. Yeah, what you're looking at is Ken Lemoog's work.
Yeah. Okay.
Drawing.
That's fine. So okay, there you go. It's just waiting for these to clear up again. So again, for anyone interested, this is definitely probably the one you could start with if you're interested in going on Steve's site and acquiring these issues, either for as a digital download. They're both available as a digital download and print. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah, just write to me directly. sam.bison@yahoo.com. You'll see it if you go to anarchysam.com.
Yep.
And just write me, and we'll work it out.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's already under the description of these videos as you've been watching this interview and keep on watching, and hopefully you can straight away go there to the
Eric Larson story is coming up.
But then we will share that again before the ending of the interview one more time. So this is a short story, so it's probably a nice entry point to the series, I would say, isn't it? And then you can acquire the individual issues. So issue 1, issue 2, which I'm showing here, and then we got issue 3, which is out already as well, with a nice hand-painted acrylic cover. And here you introduce a new character. Yeah, well, what's the name of this guy here? The panda guy here?
Oh, that's Eknath, and he's a wannabe Indian chief of the rival tribe, right? So it became a West Side story, Western, right?
Awesome.
A Western Side story, and he was the rival love interest of Nita Five Moons, who he does in.
Well, this is a pretty cool take because you got the Buffalo guy, which is working for the Union Army, and then you got this panda bear fellow, which is fancies himself as a Indian tribe chief. And what other anthropomorphic animals you're going to be bringing? I mean, he's going to have an eagle as part of I don't know, the Confederate Army or something like that.
Actually, that's not a bad idea. Now I'll
Yeah,
take it. I'm not
yeah.
going to give you any credit, though. Of course.
No, of course not. I mean, I'm actually surprised someone hasn't stolen this idea yet of the panda bear with the nice rib claws on his chest.
The funny thing is that he's not even supposed to be a panda bear. There's a backstory to why he's albino and he's lost all his hair. But
I see. That's awesome.
in the comic, he's a shapeshifter, so he takes the form of a black bear, but it's always his colors, right? So
Right.
it's always white, and the slashes, the scars on his chest are from that bear that he killed, earlier when he was not a sick Indian.
All right. Awesome.
And so other animals, I was thinking of bringing in some moose, and
Mm-hmm.
the one that I did have, it was going to be already written, was an alligator, because I wanted it to involve Harriet Tubman. So once again, just a side note, I had hired a writer to do the Harriet Tubman story, right, which was going to be just before the Civil War ends, and Harriet Tubman was going to be involved with the taking down of this alligator who was a shape-shifting slave owner, right?
Right.
Plantation owner. And unfortunately, that one shot got derailed because suddenly Harriet Tubman Demon Hunter or Demon Slayer or whatever came out. And once again, I don't know if it's collective consciousness or what, but it's very interesting. I'm sure it's happened to a lot of people out there. I'm not the only one, so I don't have tissues on my desk for my tears. But it's just interesting, I find, that you come out with a concept and then other people suddenly have it. And suddenly now there's all these Indians in indie comics. All these Native American titles pop up. And
Well, I mean, I won't feel demotivated just because someone else did a slightly parallel plot. I mean, but definitely what you've said is true for any indie creator. Do not shoot all your bullets in one go. I mean, keep some of the fireworks behind you. You don't really. It is wise to get your book nice and ready before actually exposing it to the world. Because yes, it's true. The big teams are scoring, the internet every day, and anything they see, they might always take a fancy and come up with something before you do, because obviously, they have a team, in hand, they have a structure that you might not have. But I mean, it's a common panic that cannot take hold of you, because then basically none of us will do anything, or
and that's true.
be scared and hold everything back. But it is true. I mean, don't you don't really want to share any of your plot twists. You don't really want to share what is behind the concept. I mean, it's perfectly fine to promote your book with something. You need to show something, obviously. So you need to show the concept. You need to show the concept visually. It doesn't mean that you need to put all the beans in front of everyone. It doesn't mean you need to describe the premise in detail, because that obviously you have to save that for the reader. You have to save that for when people have actually already given you their hard-earned cash, and purchase your book, and that's when they should have the pleasure. Besides, it's also a kind of a plot spoiler, obviously, if you give straight away everything. So obviously, you need to have tantalizing clues. Now, the problem with the visual concept and how it gets grabbed and nabbed by other creative teams, and that is part of the reason why you're here today, because obviously they are blunted thefts, and then there is just coincidences. Now, American Bison for me, I think, is a great concept because first of all, he's set in the West, and then he grabs this lore of the American indigenous culture of the totems and the spirit animals, and then you give them personalities, you anthropomorphize them. I don't know if that's a word, but if it isn't a word, I just invented it, or maybe I think I invented it a few months before. And then obviously you create the drama around it, and I mean it's got loads of potential for a long running series. It obviously is a pity that you have very little time to work in it, because I find this story is fun, is interesting. So and you should definitely hopefully find a team to work
Yeah,
on this, a proper team to work
yeah,
on this with you, which is what you've been trying to get, isn't it?
yeah, and it is. It's hard to come by. It's hard to come by. I can see why bands break up so easily. I'll just leave it at that, because it
Yeah.
is hard to work with people. And then, like, Lou was starting to get more followers based off of his American Bison idea, and man, it's like, dang, I'm not even getting paid any money for this, and Lou's already gotten all the accolades for the idea.
Hmm.
It's like, ah, man.
Now, let me ask you something. Obviously, this is a little bit more personal into the actual profit detail. And if you don't want to go there too
No,
much, we won't need to. But,
like I said, I have another career, so
yeah, so you don't give it that. It's fine. So, but right now, this is only in your hands. So you're controlling the distribution in the sense of this. But before, when Lou was in this video, like you just mentioned, you weren't getting anything, but you was at least getting exposure. But you guys had this being published by Insane, and eventually, obviously, you have this in the Comixology as well, right? And when you guys were making sales for these issues where Lou worked with you, how were you guys actually sharing the profits, if you don't mind me asking?
well, there were very little profits to actually share, but had it come down to profit sharing, it was a limit. I believe I was going to give him like $200 if it ever
Right.
made that limit. $200 for his involvement, but he initially traded any salary or any payment. That's the word I'm looking for. Payment
Yeah.
for he just wanted credit on the title of the book. It
Yeah.
was really, so he was legitimately being paid in exposure, and it was working out for him.
Okay. Okay. So let's just delve a little bit more into this Lou Frontier character. Obviously, you mentioned he had a book called Weaker, which he was writing, and it was being published by Insane Comics. So that lasted for how long? How many issues that thing had?
Oh man, he did a issue 0. I think it only lasted. Man, it might actually been 5 issues. 4-issue series,
He wrote all that. Okay. So
but I
you
don't think it went that far.
okay. So one of the points of contention you had with Lou, apart that him creatively kind of taking the story too much in the opposite direction of what you wanted to explore. Uh, Not understanding that the short stories, one off, you were actually quite happy with that, but on the actual main series, you validated your work in reworking issue 1, but then he kind of starts stepping out of place. But you
Right.
did mention to me privately that what you partially mentioned already here, that he was grabbing ideas, the Wild West, the frontier ideas, and taking it to other teams. to other books. So, what was the one book or the books where clearly you was just using parts of your concept and just running with it and just kind of putting it into other teams' hands or using it in other books that he was writing. So how many times that happened then?
With Lou, I only know of like one serious involvement to the point where he may have been giving me their ideas. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's not cool because he was the middleman. So I'm thinking they're his ideas and he's giving them to me like, under the pretense that they're his. Right. Meanwhile, I'm stealing from this title called Oathbound with an artist, a friend of mine, Paul Gorey, drawing it. I forget the author's name. I apologize for that. But Paul was involved in Oathbound. So eventually, like a year after the Lou Frontier fallout, I wrote to Paul and I was like, hey, man, I'm just curious, whatever happened, was Lou feeding me the information I was giving with American Bison? And he said no. He said no. But there were just too many similarities of what Lou wanted to do with the story that it had to have been back and forth. There had to have been some dialogue. And I was starting to see it with the writer when the Harriet Tubman thing came out. I was like, are you kidding me? And once again, I have no proof of any of this stuff. So I don't want to be like the biggest crybaby in indie comics because I'm not, I hope I'm not portraying myself as that. But it's like, damn, everybody I've worked with, within a month or two, a book very similar to the ideas we've discussed have come out.
Yeah. Well, it just seems that this Lou Frontier. Sorry, Karen.
No, that they've been mentioned. I'm like, because obviously, if something's published within a month, that means they were thinking about it usually 4 or 5 or 6, maybe a year in advance. So I'm just saying that whenever my concept I would share with somebody, and not just mine, but the point is, I think I may have inadvertently taken Oathbound's ideas because of Lou Frontier. And if that's the case, I apologize to the Oathbound team because I had no idea. Just like you had probably been,
Well, it just seems that he became in love with the concept of the frontier and the animals and all that, and it just start not probably wanting to diversify himself as much as he could. He kind of just stuck to that and decided to kind of develop the idea over more than one project at the same time. I think that's most likely what happened. It's a question of organizing your writing when you're a writer, especially if you're enamored with a concept created by someone else. It's kind of easier because you don't own the concept and you don't have the duty to kind of stick to the concept.
Speaking of which, listen, sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt, but that happened to me when I was just graduating from SCAD in '97. I did a TV commercial for a professor, right? And she probably got paid handsomely. I think I got $1,000 from a local TV ad, 30 seconds animated for the Family Circle Cup. And the point of where I'm going with this is, a year later, the U.S. Open, a much bigger outfit, did an animated commercial. And once again, there's nothing I can do about it, because if that was like the cry, right? Oh, somebody took my character. Meanwhile, you're Siegel and Shuster, and you've come up with Superman.
Yeah.
Nothing good would have ever come. All these other heroes. So I'm not complaining when people.
Of course not. We understand that.
Yeah, it's just like I hate when you can follow it back and you can see where it occurred. That's what I dislike personally.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm sharing here right now on screen is it's nothing that Steve has worked on. It's not something on his website. This is not part of the American Bison series. This is Metamora, which is a Kickstarter, which is run by this chap, which was Steve's co-writer in a couple of issues of American Bison. Is Lou Frontier. It, he backed. I mean, this was backed. He fulfilled to the tune of $3,800, and he was never fulfilled. I mean, if the campaign was fulfilled, but no, he was the actual perks, the actual tiers were not fulfilled because Frontier just disappeared off the map completely, isn't it?
Yeah, totally, man. Talk about take the money and run.
Yeah, this seemed to be a
Shame.
nice little project, a sci-fi project. We're not gonna play the intro video up there. I don't want this thing to crash. Sometimes those things make the
And he had
stream crash.
some good people working on it, as you can see. I mean, the
Yeah.
it looks good.
So this was back in 2016, and up to today, Steve being one of the backers as well. Up to today, nothing ever came out of this. So obviously, Blue Frontier doesn't make him the most honest man by grabbing this and running with it. It's not a nerve shattering amount. He doesn't need to do any jail time from this, I'm sure. But I think it's just a guy with ideas, like you said, a guy with a. We're not here to talk trash about anyone. But obviously, since he was one of Steve's co-creators and he abandoned the project, and he kind of it seemed that under the bonnet he was playing a little bit of the double spy, giving ideas to other people and giving Steve ideas of other teams. It also seems that he's done some Kickstarters which has not fulfilled. So not necessarily maybe the most honest guy in indie comics. Just a little shout out, just in case. Well, this is kind of talking trash, isn't it? Because we're just kind of giving a heads up for anyone. If you ever come across Blue Frontier and you want to do some work with him, just be careful.
Yeah, just exactly. Just be careful of who you're getting involved in, because as Lou's name started to get dragged through the mud by his own doing,
Yeah.
my name starts getting dragged through the mud. So just be aware of that. Be careful of that.
And of course, like we were saying, in this thing of creating teams in indie comics, that is the problem. That is what is very difficult because you don't know what you're going to deal with unless they already have a little bit of a story or a little bit of a publishing history behind them, supporting them and their work. But unfortunately, in indie comics, most people are it's a one trick pony. They come out of nowhere. They seem good. They have an idea. They have the energy. They're usually young, and you want to do something with them. You do them, and then it's a 50-50 chances you're going to be disappointed or very happy with the relationship. But then that's it. Usually indie creators disappear into obscurity after 1, 2, or 4 or 5 issues. It's rare the ones that hold on for a long time, and even rarer the ones that actually manage to build a platform that they can actually leave out of and being always there. And those guys, the ones that are successful to that point, eventually in their own little corner of the market, they're not going to pair up with anyone else. They're not going to team up with anyone coming from the bottom again because they're already at the level which is like an intermediate level, and they only want to play up. They're not going to play down. They're not going to play backwards. So it is difficult. So this Blue Frontier guy, just disappeared, did a Kickstarter, went away. But in terms of stolen ideas, stolen concepts, again, I always look at things more on the visual side of it because again, as long as you haven't spilled all the beans of your premise of your story, if you kept most of your apples hidden, then all you got to show is the concept art. You kind of also another moment that you were concerned of kind of a visual kind of a misrepresentation of what you were doing was with this gentleman here. This is Ryan Pancoast. He's kind of a renowned illustrator. He's done some.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic.
Yes,
and it's funny because I was accepted to RIT as well, and would have gone through through the same course that he did.
Awesome.
He's from RIT.
Yeah, there's some wonderful illustrated work. This is some next level. But here we go. We got the anthropomorphic animals of the West. And I wanted to share his Pinterest page here because
I like what he names it, though. I like Ryan Pankost's Frontier Fantasy, which is
yes,
a good naming for a genre, his own term. And yet we were working with Lou Frontier at the time.
exactly. We got
You know, so
Ryan
that's all right.
Panko here. Now, I gotta say, on the indie front, on the indie level, there's no, as far as I know, there's no such thing of kind of selling an IP. Well, he's not selling the IP, but he's selling the concept at
Right.
a
Yeah.
low cost behind underneath the table. I don't believe there is because I mean it's so easy, like you say, it's so easy to steal an idea just by looking at some other guy's page on Twitter or on Pinterest or on Instagram.
Put it all
That there's
together.
absolutely no necessity for another creator or another visual artist to actually pay anything under the table to anyone that brings them the concept.
Not to derail you, but I've noticed that if you go to artstation.com,
Mm-hmm.
3D artists have started to give credit to where they got the initial drawing or concept idea from. I have noticed
Yes.
that. So that there is a change in at least in the 3D and digital
Yes.
realm to that. So anyway, Lewis, sorry.
Well, it's very good that you say that because actually that is basically where I wanted to take this. I wanted to take this interview into that, where really the line should be drawn between appropriating a visual idea, not so much the written concept, not so much what is behind the premise, because again, that is something that another creator can only know if he actually had access to the IP before it got published. So somehow from a backdoor, like the example you were just mentioning of Lou Frontier, you have a co-writer or you have a co-artist, and someone somewhere in your team leaks out the concept. But but for that to happen, I'm more of a believer that it needs to be a very, very high concept. That said, just like art is subjective, a high concept can also be subjective. So for me, Skyline, the movie about the aliens that come down and pull the humans onto their spaceships by using this kind of a strobe light, just like moths to the light. For me, that's high concept. But the movie was trashed by critics. It's not high concept for anyone else apart from the directors. And me, I actually enjoyed it very much. So again, a high concept is also in the eye of the beholder. Uh, but again, at the indie level, it's difficult to believe that a lot of parties are interested in the concept. Again, unless really is something out of this world that, wow, why didn't I think of that before? That kind of thing, right? So it's kind of a two-edged sword. So I do believe that writers and somebody in the team and an indie team can always kind of share and spill out information they shouldn't to competitors, to guys at the same level. And believe me, I've been in this indie crap for 30 years. And, just like yourself, I'm the living embodiment of, don't share your ideas. Let's keep them close to you unless when you really, really must bring them out. When you're really ready to launch, that's when you're ready to share the details of your idea. Until then, you keep it really close to your heart. Don't spill it out, because anyone on the indie scene, they're quite happy to steal the idea for their own books. Now, in terms of visual concepts, though, it's a tougher game. I mean, the visual concept, you put it out there, and somebody can take one part of a character and morph it into another one.
Right.
Now, in the case of Ryan Pankos here, and you only start noticing this work of him after you share American Bison complete art online. Now, I gotta say, this is very similar to what you were doing, simply for one reason. It's similar in the character structure, in the visual structure of the character that he has done. Uh, I, actually, unfortunately, I just stopped sharing Euro pages. But
Yeah,
if anyone watching this stream later on, it will be here on YouTube site to be reviewed again, and then anyone can go back on the video and have another look at Steve's pages of the bison, the way he looks, the way he presents himself, the way he walks, the way he moves, the way he was fighting.
yeah, but
And to be honest, he looks very much like this. I mean, Ryan here could have gone this way. This is one way of doing it, but it's different from this. This has got a whole different. It's got different mass. It's not here. He's doing something else. It's pretty much a human with a head of a deer, like a centaur man. But here is different. Okay, fair enough.
but
this is an elk.
in all fairness, though, Lewis, I'm sorry to talk over you, but in all fairness, there's only so many ways the physiology of an animal would work, and it's very similar to Chronicles of Narnia, the Minotaur. So
Yeah.
so he is kind of limited with the physiology of how to make this character stand upright. So honestly, I appreciate your sentiment, but I don't think he ever saw my comic. And if anything, the only place he ever saw my illustrations were on Instagram, because we had a common friend on Instagram. But once again, it could be just collective consciousness, man, where he came up with the idea around the same time and decides he's going to print a book, about a Native American child, with buffalo, so.
Well, but again, there's nothing stopping anyone really looking at a picture on Instagram and thinking, oh, I'm going to get something similar to that, But like you mentioned, it's very nice that digital artists now are doing their due and giving credit. Right. Totally. Because really, for me, that's what matters the most. Is that okay? Listen, some authorship cannot be proved. Something. Just because somebody else is working on a similar project, you cannot outright say, Jesus Christ, you guys just took that idea from me, unless it's tit for tat exactly the same thing. And then that's when obviously the liquid is spilling out of the glass. But,
and
again,
not to be hypocritical, but I mean, I did the same thing with my American Bison. I was basically ripping off Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? It's like you're taking a anthropomorphic character and you're writing a story around it. So and that's the thing with Brian. I have no hard feelings, and I'm not trying to cause lawsuits to arise or anything. It's just weird that we had a common friend, and that's the thing that's always weird to me. Whenever my concepts disappear, and once again, I'm sure it's happened to other people. There's always a common denominator somewhere in the story.
Well, I mean, you're too kind sometimes, but
awesome.
I mean, the thing with the Ninja Turtles and the Bison, again, that's derivative. It's like a homage. But the thing is that if you have a erected humanoid bison dressed up as a soldier, as a Union soldier, and then you have another guy creating another book where he has an upright anthropomorphic bison dressed up as something. That's not necessarily it's not a homage anymore. It's just that's what I meant with the thin red line, just starting to tread over the line. And now obviously this is a segue to our other subject that we wanted to explore, the other issue that maybe I'm just gonna go now, get off Band Coast. which is a lovely illustrator.
Oh yeah.
We're just going to go now to another problem that you had back in the 90s. Oh, yeah, this is your original idea for the bison. So, okay, so I'm just sharing here something that you kindly sent to me, which is from one of the image books, right? And this was this is kind of the fan mail page, isn't it? From Savage Dragon book. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, this is back from all the way 1993. Wow, that's some time ago. This was shortly after Image came out because they came out. What was it? It was the beginning of 1992, wasn't it? It was their first books was January or February
Is
1992.
that true? Yeah, I was guessing 91, but
You're probably right. Yeah, it was probably as early as 91. I only remember getting my hands on their books in 92, I think, but fair enough. Why don't you tell us exactly what happened here? I will read a bit of this later on because I think it is important to clarify where where I actually want to take this. But why don't you explain what you did back in 1993 to do related to Eric Larson's Savage Dragon? Tell us exactly what was it.
all right. So on July 31st, 1993, I decided to enter the contest. Right, it was the last day, and I think my mom came up with me, and I drove up to Newburgh, New York. Right, actually New Windsor to the FedEx plant because I had to FedEx it because it had to be postmarked that day.
Yeah, I guess so.
Right. So we rushed it up there, and what I FedExed was a painting that I had done of the superhero character or the anti-hero, right? Because anti-heroes were starting to get really big in the early 90s. Remember, this was July, 93.
Yeah.
And I was getting ready. I'd been accepted to SCAD. I started there in, September of 94. But the year earlier, I didn't know what to do. So I sent this out to Eric Larson to see if maybe I could get some sort of accolades, win the contest, and get something going, right?
Yeah, well, just explain to us exactly what was the contest about, though. What was it?
The contest was send in your original character and his powers, right? And so based on the concept of your character, he would choose from the submissions and pick a winner that would be drawn in Savage Dragon, and that person would then own the copyright to that character, and I didn't win.
Right, that's what is actually written here. So send a drawing of your best character with his power set, his skill set, personality, blah blah blah. You will fight the dragon, Savage Dragon number 10. The winner will keep the copyright, like you just said, to the character, and there's a lot of goodies here that Larson was promising. He gets 50 signed copies of the comic book where that character appears, obviously. Receives the original art from the cover of that issue, and he still gets also the original drawing printed, blah blah blah. The usual thing that comic book publishers used to do and probably still do. It does say here characters will be judged on design, concept, and name. Keep in mind the creation will be finding a dragon, and he's no wimp. And obviously, I am screen sharing here what you've sent him. So you've sent him a few pages of art where this guy was doing something, and you sent him kind of this kind of a full cover, and you got the title of the name of your character here, Vane, and he's like a cross. It's quite cool. It's kind of kinky design, Steve, man. Actually, this probably would belong more in something out of Brian Lupito, a Lady Death kind of a comic book, man. He got here across.
That's around the same time, so maybe that's why I did.
Right? Yeah. I mean the chaos universe. You got here a cross between Mephisto, I mean the actual Marvel Mephisto and the titular Mephisto, and a bit of Nightcrawler here in him. And tell us what is the the skill of this guy, the power set of this guy, because it's quite unique, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought so. So I was a big Spider-Man fan back in the day, huge Web of Spider-Man fan. And I was racking my brain over how to get a character to be able to move like Spider-Man does, right? With the webs. I mean, the webs are iconic. And the only thing I could think of, I was like, what if you could have your veins come shooting out of your body? So I was like,
Jeez.
that's it. You know, that's it. Well, a character that he's once again a scientific failure, right, for a super soldier, and
Right.
the veins can shoot out of his body, and then it was perfect because the veins bring the blood back to your heart,
Right.
right? So that's why he would inject those into his victims and then suck the blood out of them. You know, and it was the 90s, so I was going to have all these big story about where he was going to contract AIDS from somebody that he attacks, all this crazy, 90s stuff.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. So he
And
doesn't actually deliver any poison; he just sucks the blood out of his
just
users.
right, he drains them of their energy.
Right.
Correct.
So he's kind of all right. So he's kind of a life force sucker.
Yeah, exactly.
So I
And
mean, obviously, you created him with being a supporting villain, right? So obviously, it's kind of it's a weird power set. It's a really unique one, but also one that is probably slightly impractical if you want to use this guy for many issues. But certainly great if you want to use him for one issue or two. So definitely, it's a really unusual, interesting power skill. So
yeah, potentially, but not to feed into the storyline. The title, his name was Vane. It was going to be about him, and it was going to be about an anti-hero, and he's fighting a character called Ultra Justice, which was pedantic, I guess might be the word. It's pretty lame name in retrospect, because it's not ultra violent, right? And there's no ultra violence. So I was trying to go with Ultra Justice, which is just weak, but that's who he's killing on the cover.
yeah, well, I mean,
So
so
he was
Larson,
supposed to be the lead. He was supposed to
right?
be the lead.
Well, Larson eventually chosen his well, his fan that won the character choice, the prize choice. What was it? Was something to do with an animal, wasn't it?
Yeah. Lobster Boy, if memory
Lobster Boy.
serves me correctly, was the winner.
All right. Okay. Well, anyone has the Savage Dragon entire collection, or at least the first
Number
few
10.
issues.
Number 10.
Number 10, Lobster Boy fights the Savage Dragon. All right. Now, that came and went, and then you were not an avid collector, but you do have
Not
a
a
few
not a
issues.
Savage Dragon. I only
Right.
have one issue of Savage Dragon.
You only have one issue, Savage Dragon, which is issue 20, right? You,
That's
you
correct.
you've sent me here this the the cover here. I mean, then obviously this is something that anyone can check online. Savage Dragon, number 20 by Image. I would say this is probably from 95, isn't it? 94, 95,
Yeah, I'm
something
not
like that.
not exactly sure. I could check out my long box.
All right.
94, 95 is the
It's a pretty cool cover, isn't it? Because you got the helmet here of this guy, and the dragon is. I was always a little bit on the fence with Larson's line.
It's
So,
funny.
so
I was never much of a fan of his art until I looked at this issue again. I was like, you know what? He's pretty good. He's not
yeah,
bad.
he's good. I mean, yeah, there's something there. I mean, actually, sequentials they look a
I don't
little bit more. His pages look a bit more solid than his artwork, his cover artwork actually. But that's probably something just only I am seeing. I don't know. But the reason why you have kept this issue in your collection is a particularly interesting one, which is you found out that inside the pages of issue 20, 10 issues after the character that was chosen and awarded showed up, this character shows up here, and this is what I'm going to show here. Because when Steve came to me with this, I found this very very unique and very distressing. Okay, so what we're looking at here, Steve, we're looking at a blonde, which is a voluptuous blonde, but unfortunately, she has this horrible thing in her skin. What exactly does this woman does?
Uh,
What is she trying to do?
I believe they are veins protruding from her appendages.
Their
Uh,
veins protruding from her arms, isn't it? What is the name of this character?
and her name is Vane.
Oh,
Is Vane.
you sure about that?
I'm 100% sure
Well,
that
let's
Eric
get back.
Larson's character is named Vane.
Name character is named Vane, and let's go back here to your character. It's called
And
Vane,
just coincidence.
and you got these veins here, right, coming out, and then let's go back to this one. Wow, I mean this to me just like a week ago when you showed this to me for the first time, it's just looking exactly and feeling exactly like you felt and you look a week ago. It just looks like a facsimile of this. I mean, it looks very much suspiciously much like
That's
your character.
up for argument.
So we can just deduce that Mr. Larson, obviously with 200 plus issues of Savage Dragon already under his belt, that by issue 20 he had already run out of ideas, the poor thing. And obviously with all the submissions that he had so nicely infused a bunch of young men, and I'm sure young girls as well, to send to him with fresh new characters. Yeah, he just start using that catalog of characters, isn't it? I wonder how
Uh,
many more boys your age found out in
that's
the
what
pages of. Sorry.
I'm curious for the same thing. That how many boys found out in the pages of Savage Dragon?
Exactly. That is beloved creations that they're so kindly and sent to Larson got snatched and used as B and C characters just to fill in the pages. Obviously completely disposable characters. You
Right, yeah,
come
yeah,
and go.
definitely.
There is more pages to this. This one here is the next one, I presume. The guy that is, I'm sure, also one of the submissions from that contest, which is Volcano Man or whatever. He looks like a chick though, because he's got a big
Yeah, I think
butt.
it is. I think it is a chick.
I think he's a
I
chick.
sent you
Oh yeah,
that.
he's got big
That's where
breasts here as well.
that's where the name is mentioned in that first bubble.
Yes, he's right here. Vane. Yeah, beautiful vein. Beautiful is actually highlighted, and then vein is not capitalized. So just for all the guys out there, they're thinking, bullshit. That's what you guys talking about. Well, this is what we're talking about. The character is called Vein. Again, I'm going to zoom in as much as I can here. Okay, and this is the previous page, and that's Steve's character, just gender swapped.
Gender swap.
Well, I gotta say, she's. I would definitely not date her with this crap just popping out of her arms, but she's definitely prettier than your guy. I'm not saying he's
And
better art, but he's definitely prettier.
it's much better drawn. And even my buddy at the time, who was the Savage Dragon fan, who told me about this contest, I'm still good friends with him, and he's the one who told me, "Hey, by the way, man, Eric Larson has come out with a character named Vane," and I'm like, "You're kidding me." And I opened it up, I bought the issue, and I'm like, "Dude, what do you think?" I totally think he ripped me off. And even my buddy was like, "Nah, he didn't. It just happens to be the same name and same powers. He didn't rip you off." So
didn't rip you off.
I'm not trying to pick a fight with the much wealthier, much more powerful Eric Larson by any means. But it was a bit deflating because I was going off to school and I was like, wow, lesson learned. I'll just leave it. I learned a valuable lesson that day.
This is exactly the point that you were trying to make, and then now I will exhaustively make it again. It's about giving due credit. I mean, all entries should be in color and must include your age, phone number, and address. The winner will receive. Oh, basically, actually says winners. So I think you were a winner. You probably missed his phone call because he says here that they will receive a phone call from me. Yeah, well, they will receive a phone call from me and be consulted on how to handle their creation properly. Or maybe not gender swap it, maybe. Maybe you should have run down that idea by you before doing it. If you're submitting more than one creation, and this is the important bit, yeah? Because companies have been doing this forever.
Yeah.
This is their bread and butter. And the reason why they do this, and this is what I want people to understand. I'm sure people know, but just in case there's a really naive guy out there, well, I know I'm one of them, and Steve has been one as well. But this is a reason why companies such as Marvel and DC and even these chaps at Image that should know better, they should know better, and this is what pisses me off about this situation. Is because when Image came out, they came off the mainstream and they went into the indie scene with these big mouths of them, and talking this big talk and walking this big walk and playing this big game, yeah, saying that we're all about creator own. The reason why we're doing this is just that characters and books deserve independence. Not only the artists and the creative teams, but people that work and toil in this industry deserve the credit. Deserve the credit. That
Yeah,
was
sure.
that was a street cred they created for themselves. That was the veneer they created for themselves. This is about people getting the credit they deserve. That was their whole shtick. And just a couple of years in, Larson, one of the founding members, which obviously abided to that uh, to that speech, to that give credit where credit is due, is basically ripping off teenagers to to fill in his pages. So where's the credit being due, Mr. Larson? So you're abiding to that. I mean, Marvel at least never said that. Marvel quite happily and gladly rip off people, and they never apologize. But you guys went into the new market saying, this is our motto. We're going to inscribe it in Latin there below the image letters, the image logo. It says right here, all characters must be original. Please, no more cable clones, color photocopies, blah blah blah, self-addressed envelope. If you want to get your artwork back, it means you got to self-stamp an envelope. But where does he say here? It says what I wanted to make sure that everybody reads this, which is here. I've got where is his characters will be judged on design, concept, and name. Keep in mind creation will be fine drag. I've got a few thousand entries now, and a lot of them can't be considered because they have the same names as existed comic characters or ones in the works. Okay, so straight away there, this is where it starts. Okay, this preemptive strike that every major publisher does, and again, Image was no different. A few guys have even sent in a character named the Dragon. I realize it's hard to know what other people are working on. Lots of you have characters with the same names as each other. Sometimes coming up with the good names is tough as coming up with a good character. Where does he say here? I should have underlined this, Steve. I apologize. But he says here that he's part of the corporate paragraph that they always repeat. That is, which is, and it is written here somewhere. I just gotta find it. Which is, don't forget that when you send submissions to a publisher, that similar ideas are probably being developed at the time that you send your stuff. So never take it to heart and never call it death when you see something similar eventually being published by us. Everybody knows that's in the submission page, the submission form of all the major publishers, Marvel, DC, and whatever, and all that. Actually, those guys are not even taking submissions anymore because over the years they amounted so many characters given and sent by people that they don't need to do that anymore. They have enough to last 2 generations or 3 generations. So, but Larson says it here. He says it here somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sorry for
Probably.
that poor scan.
No, but he does say it here. It says it somewhere. Um,
Using big.
Well, anyway, we got the gist of it. Um, Larson,
Yeah, and certainly I'm not looking for financial reward or reparations or anything like that.
yeah.
Because obviously he would take me to court to try to prove it. But as your friend, I was appreciative when you recognized that you felt that he had overstepped the line. Because even my buddy back in '94, when he turned me on to this issue, he didn't believe it. He was like, "Nah, it's just similar. It's just coincidental." I find it hard to believe that when the person you sent the submission to is the one who eventually comes out with the character with the same name and same power as the submission you sent. That was my problem with it.
Well, I mean, my whole point is, he's grabbing. There is no doubts about this. Right? So for anyone out there, thinking like Steve's friend is thinking, that is just not wanting to face the truth, which is something most of us sometimes don't want to do. But unfortunately, there is no two ways about it. This character here is ripped off Steven's submission. There is no doubts about it because it's so unlikely, no matter how smart or creative a guy like Larson is, that he would come up with someone called Vine, which the power set is to throw veins out of his arms and suck people's blood or inject something in them. I mean, it's impossible. So the only reason why you're seeing a chick and not a guy is obviously because Larson had to mix the soup a little bit. Otherwise, it would taste too sour. You couldn't just outright just grab your design and use it because, as he says on the submission letter there, he's saying, I'm not going to keep the rights of the character. You get full credit. So I'm not going to copy anything. I'm just going to use it with your permission if you're selected and win the contest. So obviously you could not have ever used tit for tat what you've done, but this is clearly your creation.
That's my little dog.
Dog is home. He doesn't like what Larson did either.
Yeah, she's going to attack Eric. Nah, some solicitor at my door.
So that's the whole point, guys. The point is, we know this happens. We know it's the bread and butter of the industry. We haven't suddenly discovered gunpowder. This is not an eureka moment. We know this happens. The only thing is that it would have been nice for a guy like Larson to credit everyone he ripped off ideas from. Especially if ripping off the idea only means sending him or her 50 copies of his book, sign a couple of posters, and have a chat on the phone with you. I mean, it's not much to ask. No, it doesn't matter how busy Larson is. If you're going to be ripping off teenager boys and girls from the characters they conceived and had the time and the patience to send you, all that it takes is at least an acknowledgement, I mean, again,
totally.
I mean, you're not going to be creating the next Spider-Man. I mean, Larson is not going to be doing another tentpole title with your character in it. It's not going to be the main character. I know it's going to be a disposable villain, as Larson specified. And he can do many villains like this. The whole point is just give credit to people. Give credit where credit is due. That's all it would take, Larson. Just call Steven and send him 50 copies of your book. That's it. Now, listen, Larson, I know if you've done this with Steven, I mean, we are pretty sure you've done this to many others. Again, it's not a big deal, is it, Larson? Why can't you send 50, 100, 200, 500 books? Come on, man. Don't be like that. So, Larson,
And have your lawyers call Lewis, not me.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to end the stream now. It was a very insightful interview. I thank Steven very much for coming. He's getting a bit late already. So once again, your website, just clearly so everyone knows, to go and purchase American Bison. Can you tell us again what is the website?
Yeah, let me know at anarchysam.com.
anarchysam.com. com. So you go there. It's a lovely site that Steve has with a lot of interviews with other indie creators. Actually, you even sent me an interview form, and unfortunately, I haven't had the time yet to do it. And this was already 30 years ago. So you
Close to
see,
it. Yeah.
at least I don't rip off characters. And if I do, I take 30 years to come
Yeah,
to make
exactly.
something out of it.
Me too. I come, yeah, 26 years later or whatever it is to fight about it, to cry about it.
All right, so we have American Bison, 3 issues already, plus the standalone short stories. And any plans in terms of schedule for the eventual fourth issue?
You know, I've started sharpening the pencil, so to speak. But let me just tell something to anybody listening or watching this. I'm not in it for the money. I think very few of us are in it for the money. Obviously, if we had a successful IP, right, intellectual property, we'd be happy. But man, there are days where I just wish I had like one fan write to me, because I've only had one actually write to me and say, "Hey, that book you're doing is not too bad." Sometimes that's all it takes. I don't need you to share my stuff. I don't need you to buy 100 copies. Sometimes it's cool though to just support the creator. Like if you do like their stuff, let them know. That's all you got to do.
That's it. Well, yeah, I mean, and you can take this opportunity for any other closing statements to any of the creators out there. But then again, we already we already kind of
Yeah,
uh, did
we've had
quite a few advices to everyone as we went along, isn't it? But if you remember anything, you can add any moment. But yeah, my closing statements were just going to be, just don't forget to visit Steve's site. You will find it entertaining. The books are there, 4 books, 4 issues, and he's sharpening the pencils for issue 4, like you said, and hopefully
one.
complete the series. It would be really great if you could let other teams take over, but then again, it is tricky. And yeah, and the whole point with the stream is really that. I mean, keep your creations close to your heart. I know that in this day and age, and especially with no publisher behind you, no promotional vehicle, but the one you create yourself, and the need to actually expose yourself out there, it is very difficult to avoid sharing things. You need to share them if you want to sell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
It's a double-edged sword, that's for sure.
there is an impossibility that there's no way around it. But in terms of the concept, in terms of the idea behind the premise, yes, I mean, keep it with you until the last moment. Because as we saw bluntly here today, it doesn't matter who you're gonna send things to. Anyone is out there ready to grab your concept and just run with it. As you guys can see, it doesn't matter if it is a small time writer like Lou Frontier and his unfulfilled Kickstarter, or if he's a big top dog, top cat like Eric Larson, at Image. Anyone will easily take your stuff, and then there's not much you can do, unless obviously he's unless Vane and be done into a comic book that was already on issue 500, then we will be talking another story. But if it's just something like this, that's life, guys. So just it's a minefield out there. It really is a minefield, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help because you know the indie world is a vast world because there's many people in it, but it's a small world, as in only a few will actually filter into the big time, like everything.
Yeah.
Uh, Today there's more chances, more than any other time out there for anyone. So many vehicles, so many ways to get seen and get your work out there, and maybe do a few bucks, and with some luck, maybe even do a living out of it. I mean, if you only eat soups and you live in a cold room somewhere in Chicago, inking your drawings, so you can actually make a living out of that. 500 pounds a year, you can actually $500 a year. You can probably make a living out of it, but it is possible. But it's a war out there, and the thing is that it's a war at the top level, but also at the ground level, at the indie level, indie scene.
Even at my level.
It's not easy either. So there's no easy time either way. As a matter of fact, the indies kind of if the big guys are sharks, oh, the indies are vultures. So they'll clamp on anything and pick on any carcass, whatever they find, because that's is the law of the jungle, isn't it? The law of the stone
Yeah,
jungle.
that's exactly it.
I mean,
So yeah, if you're gonna make anything, try to make it exceptional.
yes, that is true. Spend 20 something years in it, perfecting it, making it amazing, wonderful, and then come out with it and still make no nickels out of it, like I did.
Yeah, that's the hard truth and risk of it all, isn't it?
That is a hard truth, because then you got to promote yourself, and that is the main thing today, is really invest in the promotion. I would say that by now, promotion is probably 70% of the game. 30% is the actual product, and 70% is a promotion, meaning it doesn't matter how good the product is. Those 30% for you can mean the world and the moon. But if you don't invest the other 70% of the time in promoting it, in getting out there, it doesn't matter. You could have the reincarnation of Jack Kirby into the guy that is doing your art of the book you're writing. But if you're not going to promote it properly and pimp the hell out of the project until you're bleeding through your ears and clawing your fingers in people to make them buy it, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter what you have in those 22 pages. Nobody's going to buy it unless you promote it. So,
Yep.
well, there you go. That's all for this time around. Steve, thank you very much for coming and sharing your story with us. Okay.
My pleasure. Hey, thanks for watching and listening if you did. And thanks, Lewis.
Thank you. See you guys later another time. Bye bye.